Hello and welcome again to Money Tips. This is Charles Kelly. Today I want to talk about making money and keeping money. In my opinion, making money and keeping money are two entirely different skills. Now, you may have read recently that Jamie Oliver's restaurant empire has gone into administration. The young and talented TV chef had rapidly built up a chain of around 50 restaurants over the last few years. Suddenly they were sort of popping up everywhere, weren't they? Like his restaurant branches, Jamie seemed to be everywhere, didn't he? He was on TV, he was advising the government, he was in America, getting into arguments with California, and he was on the Sunday Times rich list. He was just everywhere. Jamie Oliver was going, his career seemed to be going up like a rocket. And he was worth so many, every time you picked up the papers, he was worth even more millions of pounds. Now, I don't know why his restaurant went in, what went wrong there really. Some say that his prices were a little bit too high for basic Italian food. I tend to agree with that. But I think it's got a lot to do with, the expensive city centre locations and over-expansion, expanding too quickly. I've been to one of his restaurants in a few years ago in Canary Wharf. It's a huge, great place, right, in the middle of it all. And he's got places in town, in London, in the West End. He's got airports, and you can be busy in those places, but you've got to make a lot of money to cover the rent. Now, sadly, he apparently put in around £30 million of his own money when his company was on the rocks about a year ago. Evidently, like a lot of businessmen, he just couldn't let go, and he wanted to try and rescue what was by then a sinking ship. But that happens a lot. I've seen that a lot. I've done it when a business is, the trajectory is down. You kind of want to hang on to it, and you keep putting money into it. You keep thinking that you can turn things around, when sometimes it's better to sort of cut your losses and let it go. But there you go. Now, what it proves to me is that it's far easier to make money or build up a successful business than it is to keep it and keep it going for the long term. Now, when you're on a roll like Jamie was, you tend to have the tendency to want to sort of jump into the next venture and then the one after that. You think, well, I'm on a winning streak here. I've won that bet, so maybe if I keep gambling my money, I can win another bet and another bet. And at that time, you got people coming to you and saying, look, would you invest in this? Would you partner me on that? Because they want a part of your success. They think you're on a winning streak. They want to hang on to your shirt tails and get on to the next thing. And I've seen this with a lot of other successful business people that I knew. They went from having a financial services business, and they said, right, we're going to go into a estate agency, then we're going to produce records for people, then we're going to buy bars, and it was just crazy. And eventually it all come to an end. Sometimes not always through their own fault, but it's like when there's a downturn, as there is now with the high street and that sort of thing, and Brexit uncertainty, you don't want to get caught with your pants down, as it were. Perhaps Jamie business was overgeared. They had too many borrowings. They couldn't cope with a slowdown in the economy. I don't know. And yet other restaurants and other outlets seem to be booming all over the place. Eats has just been bought by Pret a Manger. They're doing really well, and they're going to open up a chain of vegan restaurants. But other places seem to be going from strength to strength. You hear of Tesco's and the big supermarkets like Sainsbury's having a bit of difficulty, and yet Aldi and Lidl are booming. So it's just, these things can happen. And when you're on a roll, it's easy to believe in your own publicity and think that you're invincible. We see this with politicians, don't we, even? Now, instead of concentrating on what you have and consolidating your business and building it up, you want to conquer the world. Now, Jamie already has had a successful TV career. He had lots of books out. He was doing TV series and going to Italy and all that sort of thing. And, he could have set up a small chain of restaurants. He could have set up a select few like Gordon Ramsay's done. But, he chose it that way. That's great. I'm sure he'll come back with something else. He's a talented guy. Now, I'm sure all businessmen look up to people like Richard Branson, don't they? So, and we'd all like to emulate Richard Branson, wouldn't we? This serial entrepreneur who's made billions from several different businesses. He had his record stores, he's had his airline, he's had airlines in different places. But it's easy to forget that before he went branching out into other ventures, he spent years building up his Virgin record and shop media, his empire, if you like. He didn't just jump from one thing to another quickly. He was selling records, then he was producing music. That kind of went together, didn't it? So it was in the same business. He didn't just immediately then say, right, I'm going to start an airline, or I'm going to start this or that. So he spent time consolidating his business before he branched into other things. And he also worked with partners, even in the record business, producing bands and that sort of thing. It wasn't his partner in that record company actually was the guy that chose the bands and built up the bands and that sort of thing. He even Richard Branson even admitted he didn't have that good taste in music, so it wasn't him. He worked with trusted partners, and like in his airlines, when he had Virgin Blue in Australia, he had a partner there. He didn't put all his money into it. In fact, sometimes I think people put most of the money in. He's putting up his name and his brand. He made hundreds of millions out of that venture when it was floated off. So he's a very clever guy. He doesn't sort of risk the farm on every venture, does he? He works with partners, and I think that's worked very, very well for him. Now, I think when he went into the airline business, he'd already sold off his Virgin record business at that time to EMI. Everyone said he was crazy, but it was the right thing to do at that time. I think he sold it for something like 500 or 600 million. And then he ignored everyone else's advice and went into airlines. They all said he was mad to do that because not many people were making money from airlines. But, again, he's a clever guy. What we also don't forget is that Virgin has also had many failures. When the record sales business started to falter, when people were buying music online, some of his businesses went into administration in other countries, the Virgin stores. So, and does anyone drink Virgin Cola now, or Virgin vodka? So Virgin condoms, all these other things that he set up along the side. We forget that he has had his failures as well as successes, but he just puts them to one side, liquidates that company, moves on to something else. And now he's going into space, isn't he? So who knows what will happen. But